Hello, I'm Rich Wagner, CEO of Prevedere, an intelligent forecasting solution provider. As a result of our volatile world in 2020 and still here in 2021, we're often being asked by clients and peers about new insights for forecasting and planning within their organizations. Based on the interest we've seen, I'm planning to put together some thoughts every week within this recording to share with business leaders across Prevedere's extended network. This week's topic, I'll be answering questions around digital transformation for FP&A teams and the role that data, analytics, and intelligent forecasting plays within the process. So let's get started. Well, the first question that I've been asked quite frequently is, how has digital transformation evolved the role of the FP&A team? Well, I think first you got to look at it in different time periods. When the pandemic began, in 2020, what we saw for finance and FP&A teams was really a defensive play. It was assessing cash positions and liquidity, trying to understand how remote workforce could accomplish day-to-day tasks like closing the books, and then starting to assess the potential impact to their current business plans. Is this going to be short-term and we're going to maintain our 2020 plans, or do we need to adjust these plans, and how do we do that? So moving to an offensive measure or an offensive play, really FP&A and the Office of Finance started to create some new process and procedures. Number one, a more agile planning process. They were collaborating more with businesses, other areas within the company to understand the impact on the business that the pandemic was having. And if there's going to be a recession, how do we handle that and how do we get ahead of it? At the beginning of the pandemic, no one knew for certain that a recession was coming, but those that kind of moved to offense already started creating plans in case it did happen. So that move was from defense to offense, really started with a increase in the frequency of which people collaborated, forecast and plan, and then a gathering of data to create some new plans that they knew were going to have to replace the 2020 plan they had in place prior to the pandemic. Well, the second question we have are, what are the new capabilities that should exist for the FP&A team as a result of this new way of forecasting and planning? Well, the first thing that we knew is FP&A had to start to understand data not only inside their organization and these historical accounting that they had to do, but they had to understand data outside their four walls, things about the pandemic, things about consumer behavior, supply and demand, and supply chain issues that they really had to start to understand. So they really went from inward focused into more outward focused to try and gather information. And then once they had some of this data points or information, they had to start to learn how to build not just a single point forecast, but maybe scenarios. Now not just one forecast they were creating, but typically three based on potential outcomes. So they became more data aware, and then they also became and really started to have the capability of creating scenarios for their forecast and planning process. So what role do data and analytics play within the digital transformation process? Well, finance has become a key source for data outside companies' four walls on things like economic conditions, the pandemic impact and recovery estimates, consumer behavior signals that could be included in the planning process. But what we know is data by itself is just noise. Without actually analyzing how these new data sets are going to or could impact the business, they're really just useless. So companies need to be able to identify external leading drivers, things that were truly related to their business, and to use those signals to show potential outcomes based on which direction these signals took. And then the next question, is digital transformation solely about implementing new technology and data platforms? Well, digital transformation must be accompanied by process and procedure change. In today's volatile world, companies can really not afford science experiments, and they must implement a repeatable process to incorporate this new digital insight into forecasting and planning long term. And they need to partner with companies that can help them create the necessary deliverables. What format do we need the information in? When do we need it? Or even better, can we integrate it into our existing tools and our forecast and planning process? So you need to find someone that's capable of not just identifying need information and creating predictive models that may or may not come true, but how can we truly change our process and procedure so this is repeatable and systematic and automated. All right, next, should the positioning the FP&A team with an organization change as a result of the global pandemic, the global recession, and as a result of really digital transformation? And for that, yes, I believe so. In times of crisis and volatility, what we've seen in leading companies is that finance leaders become more important to the viability of the business. Cash positions and external risk planning must be in place. And finance moves from this back office accountant to really the front of the ship that's involved in identifying risk and helping create really plans to steer clear of those things that may impact business performance. So with that being said, we've went through several topics or several questions, and we're going to continue to do this each week. And I wanted to say thank you to Chrissy and the entire marketing team here at Prevedere for producing this recording. And for those that have some questions they would like to have answered or more insight they would like to have, please send an email to marketing@prevedere.com. And thank you for listening. We'll be recording another session next week.